Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, our first of 2025. I'm Alison Humphries of Recruitment Leadership, in case we haven't met before, and I am delighted to be joined for this first podcast of 25 by the lovely and very impressive Penny Haslam. Now, Penny, you have had quite the career. You've been a business journalist, a TV presenter, an author. Can you just describe your journey and how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
I will try to do this in a potted version, Alison. Back when I had my first job, I worked as a temp. I did, as a secretary at the BBC. And I'd moved from Sheffield to London. I didn't have any money. I just got this temping job and I had a 3-month temporary contract. And it was in the commercial arm of the BBC, which was the magazines and video side. But I knew I wanted to be in that organisation, and I didn't care how I got into it. And eventually a permanent job came up. So I went to the Central London Broadcasting House and I became a clerk. So it was a stunning career move from secretary to clerk, which is glorified paper pusher. And, I started there. And then 20 years later, as if by magic and hard work, I found myself presenting the business news on BBC Breakfast and also doing the rolling news channel, the BBC's news channel every hour, popping up with the markets board. Often you'll see that person with the markets board behind them. The FTSE's up, the FTSE 100's up, the FTSE 100 is down. And I didn't really care that much, I found. So, I had this amazing job by the end of it. And I'd been in radio as a researcher and then as a junior producer and then a senior producer and then finally got asked to try out on telly, which I really enjoyed, but actually didn't connect with it as much as I thought I should. And of course, if you're in the top 1% of broadcasters in the country, broadcasting live on flagship programs, then it's a kind of expectation that you just never want to give that up. But I knew I wasn't happy, but I didn't know how to do anything about it. So I was at a career crunch point without actually having any tools to do anything about it. And then I got gifted an opportunity. This is funny, right? So it's not every day you get called up by Weight Watchers. They say, do you want to lose weight and we'll pay you?
Just randomly?
No, well, it's kind of randomly. I had been working, I was freelance for a long time, you see, and I was doing this TV work as well as doing hosting events and chairing panel discussions and just being a jobbing freelancer and just trying to get anything I could. And I got approached by Weight Watchers to write a white paper for them about the challenges to do with weight loss in a globalized society where we've got Starbucks and Nero and Pret and McDonald's on the high street, whereas years ago, you wouldn't be seen dead eating or drinking on the street, would you? There was nothing. There was a pub you could go to, but even then they didn't serve food. So this kind of world of food, and even our kitchens and our diners are merged into one, aren't they now? So we've got permanent access to food delivery and food. Anyway, it was a really interesting aspect of the weight loss journey for people to think about. It's not just about willpower. So I was really into that. And I was really useful for them. I helped them write it, pitch it out, flesh it out, all that kind of stuff. And in those conversations, they started asking me about how I felt about my, weight and my body and everything. I was like, this is a bit nosy, but I obviously don't mind. I'm a very open person. And I was overweight, Alison. I was on telly and I carried it well, but I was carrying lots of baby weight. And the baby was 7 by then, but as you do, I just saw it as a fantastic opportunity So I grabbed the corporate shilling, if you like, and I said goodbye to broadcasting because I couldn't be a news presenter and advertise something, which was what they were hoping I would do, was to star in some TV adverts, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was amazing. And what that enabled me to do was have a little while to just go, well, who am I? What can I bring to the world? What do I want to achieve? And it was from there I set up my own business, just me. And I started enabling other people to go on TV and radio, women to go on TV and radio, because there was, you might have noticed, a lot of blokes on telly for a long time. So I started doing that, and then I realised that I had lots to give. And you sometimes don't realise that when you've been in a job for a while, that you don't realise how much value you can bring other people. And I started learning how to speak on stages about this and present ideas and do keynotes. And I started doing training and workshops. And in the last 5 years, I've developed as an executive coach, and I help people communicate with confidence. And that is far more exciting to me than standing in front of the FTSE 100 board and going, it's increased or it's decreased.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm enabling others to do brilliant things. That's so exciting for me. It really is.
Yeah. I think one of the loveliest things about coaching people in that way is that you can actually see the results almost immediately, can't you? And for me, like an absolute total success is when somebody then seeks out opportunities to use that new skill straight after. So, okay, via this highly circuitous route, you came to be, what should we call you, a visibility coach?
No, because not everyone wants to be visible, but they don't want to be a best kept secret. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's more to do with communication and confidence. And so skilling you up in how to communicate, whether it's been a meeting or whether it's with a client or whether it's on TV and radio or a podcast, or simply having more impact at a networking event, how to package up your key messages and make them fit really well for your key audiences. And then in that, there's confidence as well. Now, I never set out to help people with their confidence, but what I found as a common theme for anyone I dealt with and it didn't matter how old they were, how young they were, it didn't matter what rank they were in their organization or whether they had, years of experience, it just didn't matter. One moment I was working with a recruitment firm's chief executive, and he was about to take part in a panel discussion. And we talked about key messages, what he was going to say, and then he stopped, almost as if to say, right, I can't go any further. He said, who am I to be up there with those other experts? Who am I to be sharing my information, if you like? I'm no better than anyone else. And that, is like our fundamental human response to being more visible is like, well, who am I to be doing this? What right have I got? And that's where the confidence piece comes in, or the sort of awareness that, but you've got a valuable message. You've always got something valuable. It's your take on it. It's your passion, your knowledge, and your expertise and experience that is valuable to others. It might not be valuable to everyone, but it will be valuable to others. So the themes are communication and confidence. So visibility, if you want it, it's there for the taking, but you don't have to have it. But don't be a best kept secret. That's the
and later on in this podcast, we're going to talk about all the different levels of communication, if you like. But perhaps a good place for us to start is, in your opinion, Penny, why is it currently so important to be able to communicate well in whatever context you're in?
Well, you stand out, don't you? If you're a good, clear communicator and confidently sound like you know what you're talking about, then people find that very compelling. And if you can mix in stories and experiences along with facts and information, if you can inspire people and inform them, then that's a much more of a compelling package for your potential candidates, your clients, or anyone who wants to sort of connect with you, stakeholders, suppliers, whatever. We're drawn, aren't we, to leaders who sound like they know what they're doing. That's possibly a drawback in current democracy terms, but people who sound like they know what they're doing, it's like a relief. Everyone goes, oh, what a relief.
I know exactly what you mean. The number of times I've sat through presentations where somebody literally reads the slides word for word, which you think would be unforgivable
it's a crime
nowadays, but it's a very, very widespread. As an audience member on those, so you actually feel awful for them and kind of because of them as well, don't you?
It's uncomfortable, and we like leaders who sound like they know what they're doing, because it saves us quite practically in cavewoman times. It saves us brain calories, so we don't have to think too much about something because someone else is showing us the way.
I
know, fascinating, isn't it? It's like, okay, we'll follow that person. So the challenge then becomes like, well, what am I going to speak about? And this is something that I had to think long and hard about when I first left the BBC, because of course I'd been reading out the news, I'd been dealing in other people's information and presenting it in a balanced way. So it was now up to me to have a voice and have an opinion and to be able to share it confidently. And I think that's where people get a bit stuck, is like, well, what am I going to say? What do I want to be known for? I could be known for loads of things. Well, what could I be known for? So that would be one of my first sort of practical ideas to suggest to people, is that they think about their image of that as an expert and back yourself in that. There's the idea of being an expert is possibly a bit scary for some people, but if you've got some knowledge and you've got some experience, then you have expertise. So think about the kinds of things that can be useful to others that you're really interested in. And those two marry up beautifully. And before you know it, you know a lot more than you did before. And you can share it.
So our listeners will be sitting thinking, okay, well, then my subject is recruitment. Would you advise going narrower than that, or
absolutely,
or outside it even?
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on your context and what sort of things you want to change the dial on. So if you want more clients who are corporate natured, you need to be able to understand them. And I think, one tip to go to, one resource that you could go to straight away, which I found incredibly valuable for my own business, was what's called a value proposition canvas. I'll share the links with you later, Alison, for people, but understanding the pain points of your customers and the gains, what do they want to achieve, and speaking to those. Now, AI is a big topic, AI in recruitment, or it might be recruiting for skills rather than experience. How can you show yourself to have real knowledge about those areas, those topics that your customers or your candidates are interested in, and do more of that. And it doesn't mean you have to marry those topics forever. People get, I'll get pigeonholed. I'll be known as the person who only ever talks about this, this, this. Well, that's okay, but it's good to be known for something the point is, it's about having something to say, isn't it? It's about having a topic to talk about that you are good at talking about, that you enjoy talking about, rather than just rocking up and going, hi, I'm here, I'm really good, and that's it. You've got to offer a bit more of a specialism, if you like.
Right. And of course, and as you say, you can update that specialism as long as you've built some background knowledge. Just an observation here that over the course of the last 5 years, as we've done more and more of our work remotely, I've noticed that many people in the recruitment industry are increasingly unwilling to go and meet their clients, their candidates, even their suppliers in person, face to face. And it's a huge missed opportunity. And regular listeners will recognize the statistics that I've quoted, where people who go to site visits with clients discover jobs that they didn't know when they got in the car or on the train. They didn't know they even existed, and they're getting exclusive briefs on those. And that, interestingly, it's one of the elements that makes you 400% more likely to fill a job if you've done a visit in person.
I can well imagine that, actually.
And these skills have been lost. And I know people will tell me, oh, well, it's not very efficient, it's too expensive to go on site visits. But actually, the return on investment is huge. And I think, just going to challenge people a little bit, I think that some of our listeners are in fact using it as an excuse, because actually they lack confidence about meeting people in person, particularly if it's more than one client, or it's likely to be a challenging meeting. And so I know Penny's going to have loads of useful advice just to get started with. Okay, so in business, Penny, and but with a particular focus on the recruitment business, what do you think are the most common mistakes that people make in their communication?
Not doing enough of it, not being congruent in their communication. And that comes back to the idea of, well, what do you want to be known for? How can you be useful? What's your specialism? So if you then diverge and like talk about, and I'm talking on social media, and I'm talking when you're dealing with clients, if you start talking about a charity that you run, or that's okay, but not all the time, or a sport that you really love, or a food that there's space for personal interest, but generally keep it business, keep it professional, and keep it on message. When you are beginning to build relationships, to be primarily known as that expert and be front of mind. You want to be front of mind for the right thing. And you asked me about why it's important right now. And we are in very challenging times for many different reasons, and many different sectors will be experiencing different things. There'll be different pushes and pulls on people's resources and appetite for growth and ability to grow and that sort of thing. So it's really important now more than ever to be front of mind. And the mistake to make is that you're front of mind for the wrong reasons. Let's remember that ego is not your amigo here. So I see a lot of people, especially in sales, let's generalize, Alison. Let's do some generalizing and stereotyping. But people with sunglasses on their LinkedIn profile, picture, looking like they're on a ski slope having a great time, is ego driven. A fast car, that sort of thing, at the racetrack, having a day out. It's fun, but does it help your customer? So you really want to show that you can help your customer. So you are last. It's not about you. It's not what's in it for what. It's all about me. It's what's in it for them. And so that's a mistake I'd say people sometimes make, is when they're getting visibility, they're perhaps getting it for things that aren't quite on point.
Yes. I can think of a number of LinkedIn profiles that I've waded through. And
I hope I'm not being rude.
I can see that people have got lots of likes.
Yeah.
But they're from their friends already.
Yeah, right.
So they've posted something about their beautiful kids, or their amazing dog, or whatever it might be. And all their friends are going, nice. Yeah. But actually, how is this introducing you to new clients or reminding clients of your existence? I don't know.
It's something that happens in a lot of people's worlds, right? So my world is often a motivational speaking world. I do keynotes, I do business conferences. I strut stages. I've got really good at it. It's taken me a while. I was crap to begin with. It's taken me a while, but now I'm really good. And what I see my speaking community, the other fellows in my world, doing is exactly that, is liking each other's posts, interviewing each other on podcasts, and just being in a little bit of an echo chamber, which is fine when you're building a network and you're looking for support and guidance and input, and you're looking to share help as well. And that's wonderful. To be part of a network is phenomenal. But this is why I don't like other speakers' posts. I don't ever ask another speaker onto a podcast. I make it about my customers, because that's who pays my rent, right?
Right. Okay.
So yeah, good point.
And he's written several books. This one I've been kindly received from Penny, a copy.
Make yourself a little bit famous, Alison.
Make Yourself a Little Bit Famous is a great read. It's very actionable and it's easy to absorb. And in it, you talk about a sort of scale, if you will, of communication, starting with just building your presence in the workplace and going all the way to being on a national TV. And what I'm hoping you're going to be able to do now for us, Penny, is to share some practical advice along that scale, if you would.
Look, this is often something that gets missed. We leave it to chance, and we know the phrase, don't we? It's not what we know, it's who we know. Actually, scratch that. It's who knows us. So if you start with that in mind and think about, well, how can I get known by the people that are important to me or useful to me, valuable to me, maybe in terms of transaction wise, but also valuable in terms of knowledge and support. And you can start with simply finding time to have a coffee with people, in person preferably, because then you really will stand out, and think about a strategy for having a coffee. Now, this is stuff that I didn't do when I was working in the BBC as a junior producer. It was something that made me very fearful because I wouldn't know what to say. And actually, if someone like me had come along and go, well, don't think about what to say, think about what to ask. So if you can write a list of 10 to 12 people, a range of them, they might be in your organization if you work in a larger organization, or they might be a list of different client types, not necessarily people who you've never met before. They're quite difficult to get time with. But, thinking about the last 2 years of people who you've come across who might be valuable to have a coffee with. And then one a month, by the end of the year, you've made friends and built relationships with 12 new people, and you've got a deeper connection. And so I would like to replace the idea of business development with building relationships. It's not about business development. I must go to networking. I must hand my business card out 1 million times and then fingers crossed something's going to happen. Actually, it's about building relationships one person at a time. There's much more value in that.
So building relationships. Now, it's an interesting thing. I've often noticed that people think that just calling you once a quarter is building a relationship.
No, it's really not.
There's a supplier to the industry who contacted me around the time that my daughter, I think she just got engaged at the time, and he clearly made a note on file that my daughter was getting married, and every quarter since then he's phoned me and he's referenced this piece of information. So it started with, oh, has the wedding happened yet? And then it moved on to, how's your daughter? Still married? And it wasn't developing the relationship in any way. It was just repetitive. How can people actually build those relationships as opposed to just going through the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really lazy and actually like he's not listening.
Exactly.
Not asking you anything about you or anything more broad. So a bit sledgehammer to crack a nut, I think, that approach. If you can be as human as possible and ask as many questions as possible, then you're much more likely to have a more nourishing discovery call, aren't you? Now is a good time. The beginning of a year is a good time, or back to school after a summer holiday, for example. Hey, just thought I'd check in and see how you're doing. What's on your requirement list this year? How can I help? Last year, remember, we did that. Really good tip, actually, I heard from someone recently, a productivity expert called Liz Hardwick. She said, using the email stream or email thread that you've been using when you haven't been in touch with someone for a while, rather than just sending a new email, use the old email that you've used, and then they can reference your conversation. It might be off the back of some great work that you did. Thanks so much, we managed to place this person brilliantly, cheers. That might have been 18 months ago. So you're picking up on that and going, hi, it's me again. Just thought I'd find out how they're getting on. Thinking about nurturing that relationship and finding out more about people is really cool. Yeah, it's obviously hard to get time with people who are busy, but if you can send them something like a link, hey, Alison, I saw this and I thought of you. It's about the top 5 things that are happening this year that you might want to be aware of. Anyway, cheers. And don't expect anything. So keep nudging, keep touching, keep saying hello. And then maybe it's time to do something like a lunch meeting. Hey, I'm in the area. I'm passing by. You might not be. You might be going there purposefully. But I'm just passing by because I'm on my way to see another client. Have you got time for a coffee or even lunch? It's a relationship, a long-term relationship as well. I think that's a mistake that people make. I know I did in business. I'm not saying I'm perfect at any of this. And fear has held me back from doing many of these things. I used to be very fearful of picking up the phone to people because, who am I? Oh, why would they want to talk to me about what I've got? There's a lot of insecurity there that can come up in different ways for different people.
Recruitment, of course, is a place where the value of having developed relationships is crystal clear, because any recruiter can place an ad on Indeed and they'll get the same people responding, unless it's a really terrible ad, of course. But if you have these relationships to draw on, these are the people that will be your ambassadors, that will, for example, make referrals for you, give you recommendations. And sometimes just having that relationship with them might mean that they spring to mind in relation to a specific job, right? Whereas otherwise you're starting from scratch and very cold. So
you can also think about relationships that have blossomed. Where did that blossoming come from? What was instrumental in that connection that you made with that person? It's not just because you're the same age, live in the same area, that sort of thing. There's more to it. So reflecting, I think reflective practice is a really good part of being in business or in a career or a role that if you want to develop, is spending half an hour Friday lunchtime, just thinking back on the week, thinking back on the year, asking yourselves questions like, I want to build more relationships this year. What have I done in the past to make that work, to enable that? So I'm more seen as a trusted advisor. And the thing is, when you begin to have lots of contact and lots of connections with people, decent conversations, you begin to build even more of a picture about what people are interested in and what they need at the moment and how you can speak their language. So it's a really valuable investment in your time and effort and pushing yourself out your comfort zone if that's the case as well. It's really well worth it.
Now, for those in our audience who work for some of the larger recruitment businesses, medium and large, sometimes they may be wanting to build their profile within their own organisation. How would you advise them to go about that?
The coffee strategy is perfect for that.
Used internally, right?
Yeah, used internally. If you think about a global organisation, maybe it's like, why shouldn't you get to know your peer partner in another sector or another country, another territory? Why not have a coffee at some point? I really like the idea of mastermind groups or special interest groups where you actually proactively set up a small group of like-minded peers who have got similar roles, similar seniority, and you have real life challenges, real time workplace challenges and focus. You might want to achieve things. You might want to find, 5 little accountability buddies in that group as well, who can hold your feet to the fire and go, hang on a minute, 6 months ago you said you were going to do that and you've not actually done anything about it. What's going on? And I'm a real advocate of mastermind groups, or some people call them action learning sets, but they're very formal. So it's a bit of a discipline, meeting once a month on a call like this, a Zoom call or in person, thinking about what your challenges are, making sure you slice the time fairly so everyone gets a chance to air their ideas and their problems, and you can build trust over time. You can do that outside a big organisation as well, with peers in the same industry, as long as there's not too much of a conflict of interest. But that is a real sort of high quality network, isn't it? When you've got 5 or 6 buddies who can just have a WhatsApp group and go, oh my gosh, this has happened today. What do I do? What do I say? I'm part of a mastermind group, and I've been in different mastermind groups the last 6-7 years, and it's been invaluable to my business. Tips, techniques, a little motivation, a bit of a push.
As a recruiter, as your career develops, one of the things that a lot of people would like to be able to do is to be heard in a more public context, like a panel discussion or even at a conference. Can you just talk us through a few hints and tips on that front? Particularly, actually, people I think would love to know, how do you get those gigs?
Right, okay, so being gig aware is a really good starting point. In the section in my book about panel discussions, and in fact that bit was so popular, I wrote a dedicated book to panel discussions, how to moderate a panel and how to take part in a panel. Because they're everywhere. They're the bread and butter of event organisers' lineups for a day. If it's a conference, there'll always be a panel discussion. Or it might be a networking event where they've got a little bit of a speaker for 15 minutes and then there's a panel discussion. So, trying to be panel aware and spotting when they're happening and what sorts of events they're happening. In that section in my book, there's a how to get on panels in the first place, a list of things to do. So you can tell people that you want to go on panels, you can identify an event that regularly has a panel discussion, and then bravely, courageously put yourself forward as a panelist. It might not be something that you're thinking about doing now, but my areas of expertise and my specialism is this. Would that help contribute to a discussion at some point? Happy to talk about it. So you're making connections, you're cold calling. Event organisers are very keen on that, to go, oh, I've not thought of that person. They can't be networked. They don't know everyone. So they're always going to be looking for fresh voices. So first of all, be panel aware of where these types of things are turning up and happening. then not put yourself forward. And then if you do get onto a panel, and I'm sure you will, is to make sure you use a photograph of you on a panel, maybe on your LinkedIn banner, so that at a glance, anyone looking at you knows that you're an expert in a tub chair, probably. That's normally how panels are organised, isn't it, on stages? There's 4 tub chairs. And if you're on one of those seats, you're deemed an expert straight away. And maximise the kind of opportunity around that. And you know what? Panel discussions are great. Speaking is hard. Presenting is hard when you seek to do it incredibly well and not just be a bullet point death by PowerPoint person, and it's a bit thin and a bit all over the place. That takes a lot of effort over time to build up to be very good at that, to get to a point where you can be paid for that. But there are networking events where you can offer to speak as well. But the nice thing about a panel discussion is that you're sharing the load. And yes, it's nerve-wracking, and yes, it's, your heart's going and it's thrilling. But the minute you finish, you're like, oh yeah, we all did it. We all made it happen. Because there are 3 or 4 of you to share the load. And you only have a short amount of time to speak, so you can't get it that wrong, can you?
Exactly. And if you ever do stumble and think, actually, I haven't got anything to say on this point, you can very graciously just, ask your co-panelists what their thoughts are, can't you?
Yeah. People love a mistake. If you go, do you know what? I've totally forgotten what I was saying. People are like, oh, that's hilarious. Isn't she memorable? But that goes back to your... Sorry.
I was just going to say, and it's quite a few years ago now, but when I first started building my network across the industry, first of all, I don't think I'd realised quite how long a run-up you need if you're approaching people for panel and conference speaking opportunities. You probably need to sort of be booked in for speaking opportunities 6 months before the event. And in order to do that, you may have had to make them aware of you the year before and attend the event so you can see what the audience is, that kind of thing. When I first went on panel discussions, I was shy and I was humble, I suppose, about my level of experience. And often in those days, it was a long time ago, I was the only woman on the panel and, the token woman. And I was so worried about not disagreeing with somebody and deferring. And I was conditioned that if somebody started talking over me, I would shut up and say, oh, sorry. Now, I don't do that anymore. And I also know that actually, from the audience's point of view, it's much more interesting if you do disagree, as long as you can see why.
And you don't mean like have a fight, do you? Because that's uncomfortable for everyone. You mean like, oh, well, okay, that's an interesting point. But what I'd like to inject here is a point of difference, where I'd say from my experience, this. But yeah, there's nothing more boring than going, I couldn't agree more. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. I couldn't agree more and all that kind of stuff. So yes, having a point of difference. And that all goes back to like that idea of what is your specialism? What do you want to be known for? And the more that you fashion that image of someone who knows about X, Y, or Z, the more you're likely to be seen as someone who can sit in that tub chair and add a point of difference. So panel lineups are curated so that people aren't all from the same places and aren't from the same backgrounds. So even the smallest of businesses, the youngest of owners, they have a chance to be on a panel discussion for sure. But you're right about the lead-in time. It can be weeks and weeks and weeks. So, which is why it's a good idea to keep an eye on the calendar, attend events yourself, get to know the beast, and so that you can make your approaches maybe the month after an event has finished. If it's an annual event, if it's a big conference, almost immediately people will be thinking about the next year's conference, especially the big set piece events that you might pay big ticket numbers to go to.
Exactly. Yes, so true. And so just now thinking about the big one, the conference opportunities that many people will not seek out, but if that is what you want for yourself, you do have to put yourself forward with a proposal, don't you? You have to get to get the attention of the organizer. One of the things that people often ask me about is, should I use humour or do I run the risk of it falling flat? What do you think about that?
I use humour a lot, but I don't tell jokes.
Right.
Jokes are rubbish. Have you heard the one about blah, blah? Or something with a punchline, because you run the risk of people not getting it or it not quite landing for that particular audience, especially if your audience is global. It might be a local reference that you think is hilarious, but not very funny. And you can get yourself in a bit of trouble if you tell the wrong sort of joke. You might think it's funny, but it's not quite right. So I would say, use humor. I mean, it's very rare that I meet someone who's not humorous or not entertaining in some way. And you don't have to be funny. It's not like stand-up comedy, but you can use self-deprecation. You can use the context of the stage. I'm often on stages that are really wide. So the room is really wide from left to right. And the first time I was confronted with a room like that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do a lot of engaging left and right to make sure the people in the corners aren't missed out. So I said, I always say hello when I get on stage. Hello, how are you? And then I go over to the right, walk all the way to the right-hand side of the stage and talk to that audience, that section of the audience, and go, hello. And then I go all the way to the left. How are we on the left? How are we on the far right? I say. And people go, oh, does she mean that? And I go, sorry, no offense. And they laugh. And it just came out naturally. Now, I tend to repeat that sometimes if I'm in wide stages and there's a big room like that. But don't feel afraid of going with your instinct sometimes. And there is a real value in recording or being recorded when you're speaking, is not to give yourself a hard time over whether you were any good or not. Forget that. Look for where you were brilliant and repeat it. So things you might say off the cuff, if you didn't capture that either audio or video wise and listen back and maybe transcribe it, you'd missed out those pieces of gold. And the people, do not start typing your presentation. That's going to kill all that sort of stuff. I've got a presentation planning tool that, is about bullet points for your own mental map of where you are, not for exactly the words you need to say. And there's days and days of training involved in being a great speaker like this. But my starting point for this would be, make your approaches, tell people what you want to talk about, get back to your area of expertise, the trusted advisor stuff that you've got to bring, and develop a talk on that. Don't try and do a talk that just fits every audience, because you'll be doing loads of different talks and it will never be good. So fashion a product that's a really good keynote or a really good 20-minute presentation that you can do at any networking group, for example, to start with, and build your stage time. Like a pilot, you wouldn't expect a pilot to be able to fly a plane without having any flying hours under their belt, would you? So you've got to hit the stages and have a go when it's a bit rough, right? New material, take it to the stage and see what happens.
I think it's very helpful to remember that, just as I was saying, with a bad presentation, people are curling up and dying inside. Most of your audience actually wants you to be good, don't they? They'll get far more from it if you are a good presenter, and they therefore are giving you the benefit of the doubt. Just to echo something you just said, one of the most important things I learned years ago was exactly not to get a pen and paper and start writing an essay when planning a presentation. So I always use a mind map as my starter, and then I edit stuff out.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
People do try to plan a presentation in too linear a fashion, and that's not actually how your brain works. No. It just stifles creativity, doesn't it?
Oh, you won't end up in all sorts of trouble. My first talk ever was a 13-page script. I was trying to do eye contact and read my script at the same time. I find it really hard. But also, if you ever get, you're told it's 40-minute talk, but you get there on the day and go, do you know what, the previous speaker overran, and could you cut it down to 15 minutes? You should be able to go, absolutely no problem. But when you've got a written out word by word script, or you've memorized it in your head and you're trying to recall it, which bit do you take out? How do you know? So it's good to have that kind of mind map, that bullet point. So you're speaking to the points you want to make, not trying to recall the words that you've written about them, because they'll be wooden. It's very rare to be able to write for speech unless you've been in broadcasting for years.
Yes.
At the ends of your fingers.
So we've run out of time today. Just a reminder, our audience, this book is available on our good friend Amazon, I assume.
Oh, yeah, just Google it and it comes up.
And that's by Penny Haslam. And Penny, if listeners want to get in touch with you to talk about how you can support them in their business, how should they do that?
Well, I'm quite easy to find because we've worked hard on the SEO aspect of everything. But really, if you go to LinkedIn, you'll find me, Penny Haslam, and I have a brilliant fortnightly newsletter on LinkedIn, which you can subscribe to, which is all about workplace confidence. So it's good for business owners, it's good for those in roles in larger organizations who want to build their confidence and their communication abilities. It's stuffed full of practical tips. Short and to the point, which is a bit like me. Penny Haslam, I'm there. And also I've got a couple of websites. One is for speaking. So that gives a flavour of what it looks like to be a professional speaker. And I think that's useful if you're thinking about productizing some of the things you want to talk about, if you want to think about that journey for yourself. And then there's also a training coaching website. My business is called Bit Famous, which is what I think I was for a little while when I was on telly. Not anymore, but just a little bit famous. And I think that's what most people would like to be in the world, isn't it? They people to be acknowledged and recognised and valuable. And I think that's how you can do that, through being a little bit famous. So, yeah.
Lovely. Well, I think 2025 should be all of our listeners' years for becoming a little bit famous. Penny, really appreciate your insights. I know our listeners will have got a flavour of what you can do. And Penny does individual coaching and training sessions, and it's all detailed on her website. So Penny Haslam, thank you very much for joining us today. And this is Alison Humphries of Recruitment Leadership signing off. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.